Hello and welcome to the latest episode of STEELS Talk with me, your host, Adam Alcroft. I just want to apologise for the long wait for a new episode. We had a few things we wanted to improve on from the last few, and it just took us some time to get some new technical details in place, but everything is ready now. And trust me, it has been worth the wait. That's because today's guest is Stefan Zoll, one of Stocksbridge's best ever strikers and probably most enigmatic figures. Today he talks to me not just about his time with the STEELS, but also the conspiracy theories about him when he played in Sudan, why he felt he was different to other footballers, and his love for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So let's get on with it, and welcome Stefan Zoll to the show. So thank you very much, Stefan, for joining us today. And my first question has to be, what country am I talking to in right now? Because you seem to always be in some other brilliant place in the world.
Well, I actually recently moved back to England after many years away. Actually, it was almost 15 years I spent in the Middle East, in one country or another. But the vast majority of the past, since 2008, I was in Saudi Arabia, living, working over there. And so it was about 2 years ago I returned back to England. It's been a long time. I'm just getting used to being back in England again.
So what is it like living in Saudi Arabia? Because it's a place where more and more people seem to be going now. What is it? Is it a huge culture shock when you move there, and how different is it to living here in the UK?
Well, that's. I mean, it's definitely an interesting story because when I first arrived in Saudi, it wasn't actually the first time I was there. I first went in 2003 as part of a sports exchange program. It was something I got connected into with my university, and I went over as an ambassador representing football from the UK. Back then, it was a very, very different place to how it is now. It was one of the most isolated countries in the world. You could put it alongside pretty much North Korea, and yeah, it was North Korea, Saudi, Iran. It was basically like this. These are pretty much the most isolated countries in the world when it would come to simply being able to visit them. And Saudi Arabia was no different then. For example, there were no tourist visas when I first arrived, so you couldn't simply decide you wanted to visit Saudi Arabia. You would have to have a work visa or some kind of special invitation visa, business visa, or something like this. So, yeah, in that respect, you were going into the complete unknown. There were restrictions on the media, for example. There was very little known about what was actually happening inside of Saudi Arabia, other than by accounts from Saudis who had, for example, left for one reason or another, or had been traveling. So, yeah, there was a huge difference in the way the country has changed since the days that I arrived, the early years, and then the recent changes that we've seen there now, where you have major sporting events happening, you have massive boxing matches happening. Just the whole change of society there has been very, very rapid within the past 20 years. So, yeah, huge changes.
Quite coincidentally, before going into this podcast, I actually ended up listening to quite a few interviews with some of the footballers who've gone over there with, the Saudi, I think it's Super League, isn't it? That's been getting bigger and bigger. What would be your advice to any players that are going to move over there, having obviously knowing what footballers are like, and how can they better just do it in Saudi Arabia and make the most of the extra money that's on offer over there?
Yeah, well, it's as I said, the changes that have happened in recent years mean that the lifestyle there is not it's not inhospitable, for example, to footballers in certain senses, in terms of the modernity of life, the way that you would go about your daily life. It's definitely a lot different now than it used to be. So, but then at the same time, you don't have access to certain lifestyle elements that some footballers might like to. For example, nightlife is very different. There aren't really nightclubs as such, if that were your thing, for example. Although I don't know, it seems quite risky for most modern footballers to go out to nightclubs these days. But Yeah, it really depends on the type of lifestyle that you would be willing to live. I think that's one of the big things. If you like a life of luxury, though, for sure, Saudi is a place where you can enjoy a very luxurious lifestyle.
It isn't just Saudi Arabia that you have been to in your life. It seems like you've gone across the world. You don't just pick the places that have package holidays from Hayes Travel. Could you tell us about why you go to all these unique places in the world rather than just the beaten track?
My interest in travel started really from a young age because, as you may know, my father was German, and I would travel to see him in Germany when I was very young. I remember going on a plane. I must have been maybe 5 or 6 years old. I was by myself. I went as an unaccompanied minor, and I flew over to see my dad in Frankfurt. So I was used to going to airports from like a very early age, traveling by myself. As strange as that is. And so it gave me an interest in the world, and I saw something a little bit different than my hometown of Leeds, which was where my mum was from. That pushed on into my adult life when I became very interested in languages after my professional football career ended, and I was thinking of studying a language so I could have the opportunity to travel to different countries. I whittled a choice down between Chinese, Japanese, Russian, and Arabic. I looked at all of those languages before applying to university to study, and I ended up deciding on Arabic. It seemed like the most politically relevant because I started that degree in 2002, which was a year after September the 11th happened, which was 2001. So there was a lot of focus on the Middle East and the politics of the Middle East. So Arabic seemed like a very pertinent language to study at the time, and that effectively connected me to the Arabic speaking world for the next 20 plus years, essentially speaking. So yeah, it took me to different countries. I lived in Morocco for a year, for example. I studied Arabic there. I did volunteer work in Sudan for a period of time. I cornered MMA fighters in Jordan. I competed in jiu-jitsu in Saudi Arabia. I also went to Syria before the war. So yeah, kind of all over random Arabic-speaking countries I ended up visiting for one reason or another. Yeah, it was interesting. I have some stories to tell.
Yes, and one of those stories I'm going to press on because otherwise I've got to give my journalism degree back to the university. Because what happened in Syria?
Well, that was yeah, it was an interesting story. It was a very, very tense time politically in the world because it was the year of the 7/7 bombings in the UK. So I think, and the ongoing invasion of Iraq. So there were a lot of global tensions, and Syria was again a very isolated country in the world with the dictatorship that was in place there. It was a very oppressive country, and very few foreigners were really able to live freely there and go around. It was more accessible in Saudi Arabia, for example, as you could get tourist visas, but it was still a country that had dangerous elements and dangerous aspects to it. I actually went to study Arabic at an institute there where many foreigners were being taught. And the government, I'd heard before visiting that the government had a habit of picking up foreign nationals, arresting them without charge, holding them for indefinite periods of time. But I kind of always assumed that this was mainly the people from Arab countries, or not necessarily European visitors or Western visitors, so to speak. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case in in my case, and I was picked up by the secret police from an apartment where I was studying, and they came with Kalashnikovs, plain clothes. I thought I was being kidnapped to start off with. So, and at that time, I'm not sure how if you remember these things, there were some very difficult times happening in Iraq with foreign nationals being kidnapped and treated in the most heinous ways. So I feared that I may endure a similar fate. I was taken to a police station. It was actually the home of the secret police. They were very notorious for torturing and disappearing citizens of Syria and many citizens of other Arab countries. And this was standard practice, and it was always something people understood happened. But because Syria was such an isolated country, there was no response from the international community when these things happened. Because unless it was a Westerner, it was often people would turn a blind eye to these type of things. So yeah, they took me to this secret police, the home of the secret police. It was in a suburb of Damascus. They held me in a police station for 3 days. I I witnessed with my own eyes the torture of Syrian nationals, what I presumed were Syrian nationals from their appearance and the dialect that I heard them speaking. And it was a super traumatic time. I was interrogated relentlessly for that period of time, but I think it was my British passport that eventually saved me because they released me unceremoniously, dumping me onto the street after 3 days of interrogation. So yeah, I think just having my British passport at that time was sufficient enough to just keep me safe. But there are many other people that have disappeared indefinitely after visiting such places. So I have to consider myself lucky on that adventure.
And just from when I've read about this story before, this was in 2005. So was this in the summer in between playing for Stocksbridge Park Steels?
It was probably yes, probably yeah.
So while all the other lads were probably out in Mallorca and stuff, you were in Syria having this awful traumatic experience. Did you tell any of it when you got back to training?
No, 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 no. There's no. These are not. I guess these are not changing room stories. It's not the traditional football banter. I never lived the traditional football banter type of lifestyle. I was always amazed at the banter of the guys and the way it was a funny thing. But I don't know. I was always doing something different or engaged in my mind in another place. So yeah, it wasn't a story that I shared widely actually.
But when you were in these trips abroad, you did play some football. I saw you played for Al-Hilal in Sudan, which for our listeners, that is the biggest club in Sudan. They play in the African Champions League, and also at Magraba
Yes.
Fez in Morocco. That stadium's up for
Yeah.
consideration for the World Cup in 2030. What's it like
Oh
playing in
wow. Yeah.
Africa?
That was an incredible experience actually. Yeah. When I went to Sudan, it was just that was phenomenal. Well, first of all, you have to deal with playing in a heat that is the type of heat you can't possibly imagine. But it was I can't even begin to describe the experience. It was really wonderful.
Different from Stocksbridge, the
To be able
heat.
to play. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Not like those cold, rainy nights up in Stocksbridge. It was a different ball game for sure. Of course, you have different types of pitches. The condition of the pitches was less than optimal a lot of the time. But there were some incredibly skillful players there, and a love for football is something universal. Of course, you find that in every part of the world. And there was a similar experience in Morocco. I actually started playing street football whilst I was there in Morocco, and I would play some incredible like five-a-side pickup games in random parts of the city with kids who were just obsessed with football. They would play day and night, and I had a great time there. Eventually jumped in with Al-Maghrib. I played there for it was only a few weeks actually because I was trying to fit it in around my studies. But I was playing with the first team, had some training sessions there, and they were incredibly skillful as well. In Morocco, there were some incredible players there. Yeah, of course, football is the global language. It connects people in so many different parts of the world. So it was great to see and experience those.
What were the atmospheres like that? Because I've seen some of the clips of Africa, and that seems to be where Europeans have the most experience, and they're brilliant. And Moroccan football in particular, I've seen the Casablanca derby footage, and that just looks
Yeah.
insane. Were the atmospheres just brilliant when you were there?
Of course, yeah. Football is something huge in those countries. It unifies people. It gives them something special to focus upon as well. And entertainment is very different there as well. There isn't a huge, for example, theatre or cinema culture there. People don't really have much to do outside of sporting events and in particular football. So it's easy to see why football gains so much attention in those type of countries. Football is, of course, huge. Amazing, amazing atmospheres.
And while you were at Al-Hilal, what was this conspiracy theory that started about you?
Yeah, this was great. There was a rival team in so the city I was staying in was called Khartoum, and there was a rival team called Ittihad, and they wanted to they didn't want Al-Hilal to have the prestige of having a foreign player playing for them because they had no European players playing for them at the time. So they were trying to find a way of discrediting me whilst playing for them, and they came up with this story because I spoke some Arabic at the time. Actually, it was I think that was 2003, so I was only in the second year of my Arabic degree, so my Arabic was it's pretty bad at that time, you know. But they came up with the story that I was actually an albino Sudani or albino Sudanese guy, uh, and that I just was speaking Arabic, and they just found me and were trying to pass me off as this European player, whereas I wasn't really a European player. So that was actually a published story in the newspaper. I wish I still had it. I saw it. It was really hilarious
Did, did that get
propaganda, you know.
did that get any traction? Did anyone actually believe that, or did you have to deal with that as a problem?
Well,
People coming up to you and say you're not really a European.
well, the thing is, remember, this was 2003, so you didn't have mobile phone. There was no internet. There was nothing. So, like, people would read this in the newspaper, and they would have some credence, right? They would think, okay, maybe he is a Sudani albino, you know.
That's it. Just
So yeah,
It's just absolutely mad. This is a personal love of mine. All this football that's happening in countries you don't think of usually. I listen to a lot of podcasts on it, and it's just fascinating to hear all these stories from the countries again you
yeah,
don't hear much. And you're great. You can actually watch it on your phone now. There's an app for watching football in
right. That's
Sudan.
crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
FIFA Plus, by the
yeah,
way, for
it's
anyone who's interested.
crazy.
But we'll move on to more familiar grounds, onto Stocksbridge itself. How did the move to Stocksbridge come about?
It's a little bit hazy, to be honest. You're talking quite a few years ago. As I mentioned to you, I played professionally. I mean, I left school at 16. I signed for Barnsley in the YTS system. I had spells at Tottenham Hotspur. I was in the reserves at Tottenham during the time. Christian Gross was the manager. They had Jurgen Klinsmann playing up front, and so I had 6 months spell at Tottenham. Then I also had a spell at Crystal Palace as a youth in the reserves. Terry Venables was the manager at the time. And I felt like I was getting to the point where I was getting close to making a first team appearance. I got an opportunity to go out and play in the French second division when I was 19 years old. So I signed a year contract with Dunkirk. Played a year there. It didn't really go how I planned. I came back and back to the UK when I was 20 years old, and I couldn't get back into professional football at that time as there were many players similar to me. There were so many players each year that just they kind of end up filtering into non-league, and that's what happened to me. I just filtered into non-league football. Eventually ended up at Stocksbridge. I think I was probably playing at a maybe Pickering before then. I played at a few non-league clubs in the Yorkshire area because my mum is from Leeds. I had a small stint at Whitby, but I think for sure I did my best work at Stocksbridge. Again, I can't remember exactly how it came about. Just Pete got in touch with me, said, come on by, come and have a look at the ground and sign for us. So yeah, of course, when I saw the ground, I was actually very impressed because it's quite rare that you find good quality pitches in non-league at those type of levels. And Stocksbridge, their pitch was certainly better than many of the other grounds in the league at that level. So yeah, I thought I would give it a go and see how it was at Stocksbridge, and definitely I had some of the best years of my non-league life there.
Yeah, so we talked to Peter Rinkovic a bit back, and he raves about you, says you were one of his best players. Is what when you went into the dressing room and saw what the other team, what were the players that you remember particularly from that time, and what did you think of the rest of the team?
Well, Pete had a really great team at that time. I think it was even he during my period there, even it just started to he just made some really amazing signings, and he managed to really gel the group of players that they had. I can't actually remember many of the names, but Stephen Hawes, honestly, I can't recall many names, but there were some really great players of just so much quality. And I know we had a really good team at the time, and we had a lot of success, and the players were really great. It's quite rare that you see that at non-league level, such a collection of good players together. I think we could have just done more. We just maybe it's always difficult, I think, for non-league clubs to keep players in at semi-professional level. It's difficult to just keep teams together, I think. But Pete did a great job during that time, and he got together just a group of really great players, and I had so many great memories playing there.
Well, you did play alongside our current management team of Ian Richards and Andy Rain. Do you have any particular members of them? I think Andy Ring's copied your style in terms of your hair and the beard and everything now. I think,
Yes, yeah, Andy Ring, of course. Yeah, I remember Andy, of course, and Andy was my strike partner for much of the time as well. Maybe my final season or one of the seasons I remember. Yeah, so he was a big, strong, classic striker. So he was quite a good complement for me to play with as well. I enjoyed playing with him. Yeah, I just like to get the ball and just take everybody on and score. I wanted to score beautiful goals. That was my that was what gave me the most pleasure, scoring beautiful goals.
yeah. And on that, I've been asking around a lot of the people who were there about their memories of you. And Peter Rinkovic mentioned this particular one as well in the podcast a few episodes ago. There was a goal against Marine. It's been brought up a few
Yeah,
times.
yeah.
This one. This is the one where apparently the ball got cleared to you after a corner, already down to 10 man, and because Duncan Richards has been sent off, and you've gone past a few players and scored to beat Marine in the semi-final of the League Cup and get to the final of what one of the biggest finals Stocksbridge has ever been in. What do you remember
Yeah, I
of that
remember it
goal?
well. Yeah. Oh, I remember both goals really well. I knew it was a big game. Those were the type of games that I wanted to play in because I always believed that I could play at a higher level, and I wanted to. Obviously, I had played professionally. I'd played at a high level, and I still believed that I could make it at a high level. It was just getting the opportunity was always a challenge for a young player. But that game against Marine, it was just a beautiful game. The second goal, I remember the first goal. I remember the second goal. I remember the player being sent off. It was a great game. It was a classic game in the history of Stocksbridge for sure. It was an honour to be part of it. And scoring, yeah, the second goal was amazing. And I always made sure when I scored the big goals, I would go and celebrate with Pete, because I kind of I like to make him happy. I like to make the team happy. I like to score the goals for the team. So yeah, that was a beautiful moment. I will never forget it for sure.
Is there any other particular memories from playing for Stockbridge that just you remember very fondly?
Certainly scoring some of the best goals I've ever scored. Yeah, I remember there was a few goals particularly that I scored in front of my father. My father was my biggest supporter. He'd always helped me throughout my career. He'd helped me in many different ways and supported me. So he would come over. He was living in France for the remaining part of his life, and he would always make a great effort to come and watch me play. So I managed to score some really amazing goals in front of him. I remember there was one against maybe Bishop Auckland. I think that it was them. It was probably the best goal of my non-league career, maybe arguably better than the Marine goal. Took the ball from inside our own penalty area, I think, and I took it all away and scored. And that was just beautiful to be able to score that in front of my father. And yeah, that made me very happy. So, but a lot of amazing moments playing different games and the highs and the lows of football. Just the experience was experiences of a lifetime for sure.
One thing also when I've been asking around about you is that one of the thing that came back consistently is that you were not the typical footballer. You were not the one who'd be propping up Brackenmore Social Club until 8 o'clock like some of them, if not later. What was it like trying to
Yeah.
fit in with a lot of lads who did like propping up Brackenmore Social Club until 8 o'clock, if not later? And how is it trying to get on with lads who are obviously very different to you?
I guess I've never felt like a typical footballer. In many respects, I was always interested in many different things outside of football. I was a football fan of sorts, but for example, I never supported a team. Certainly not into my not. I didn't. I was neither really a Leeds supporter. I wasn't a supporter for any team as such. My dad, my dad liked the German teams. He, for example, liked Bayern Munich, but he was from Frankfurt. He loved to watch any German team he would watch. But yeah, I didn't have a particular bias as such for any team. So it was a learning experience for me, really being around footballers and the mentality involved. It was difficult at times because I guess I didn't feel I was connecting with people and as such. It was only really when I got into martial arts that I started to see things a little bit differently about relationships with people and connecting with people and understanding the human experience. But yeah, I never had any issues getting on with the team. I loved the humor. The football banter was always something amazing, and I had some great experiences.
Because this seems to be something Peter Inkovich wanted was this like team morale boosting, which he did do by making sure you couldn't leave the bar. It seemed like a great atmosphere in the team at the time. Was that the thing you enjoyed the most, or was it just playing on the pitch and scoring those fantastic goals?
Of course, the atmosphere was amazing. There were some real comedians in the team. The team bus rides were ridiculous stories of all kinds of bizarre nights out, drinking, women, and so on. Various X-rated stories when the norm on the team bus. But yeah, the atmosphere was amazing. But of course, I loved the game. I love to play. I love to score goals. I love to create kind of like an art from football.
So obviously you mentioned earlier you moved to Saudi Arabia to teach, I believe it was. Was there any sort of regret in leaving Stocksbridge at an age where you probably could have given a lot more years to the club and still been at the top of your game? Or were you quite happy that you were able to try something completely different by moving out there?
I did think about that. I guess it was a complex thing. It was a complex moment in my life because there were so many different things happening. I wasn't sure there was going to be a future for me in football, and I had this taste for adventure. So I realized I wasn't living a normal life already. I didn't grow up living really a normal life. You know, my father was a classical musician. He wasn't like a normal person. You know, so my childhood felt always a little bit different, and I wanted adventure. I had the opportunity to go and work in Saudi, and it just took me on a whole new chapter and a whole new series of adventures. And I think it was a great moment in my life actually, and it took me into another sport professionally. So yeah, I guess that was the way it happened, and I've had some amazing experiences, the highs and lows.
And another one I've got to ask is that when you were at Tottenham, like you mentioned, you played alongside a young Peter Crouch. He was in the
Yeah,
system at the
yeah,
same
yeah,
time. At Stocksbridge, you were just seeing the rise of a certain Mr. Jamie Vardy.
yeah, yeah.
Which one did you think would be go on to be the better player? Because obviously both went on to be incredible.
Yeah. Well, I remember Jamie very clearly. I don't know what it was that stuck with me about him. I think he was actually playing midfield when he was playing at Stocksbridge, if I remember rightly, and you could see he had raw talent, but in a similar way to Peter Crouch, when I saw him playing, I just remember Peter Crouch standing on my foot, when, in a tackle once. He was just so awkward. He was kind of like he was so skinny. As imagine a 16-year-old, 7 foot tall guy. He was really skinny. You could see they were just trying to work with him, and I thought this guy's never going to be a player. But and then see how wrong we were about Peter Crouch. But I guess with Jamie, yeah, you just saw these little flashes, but I didn't see enough of him to say, yeah, okay, this guy has what it takes. I think there were so many non-league players who I played with and who are very, very high level and could have easily played at a high level, but it's just the way the game is. There are so many young players every year that get let go by professional teams and they filter into non-league, and some may get back eventually, some may not. And I guess that's one of the sad things about the life of a footballer. If you put everything into being a footballer, you may eventually get nothing out of it. And again, that was another motivating factor for me when I had the opportunity to explore work and leave football. I had to make that decision. Could I be the Jamie Vardy? Could that happen to me? But I think there are so many variable factors you never really know. And Jamie just was in the right place at the right time, and his talent developed, and he had an amazing career. And it's amazing that I was on the pitch with him, of course.
Do you think it had things took a different direction that you could have been playing or in a high division? Because it's a common refrain about you that you were too good for Stocksbridge.
No, no, I felt when I played, I felt like I could do anything. I felt when I got the ball, I felt like I could beat anybody. I felt like I could dribble past anybody. I felt I could do things with the ball that other players couldn't do. Like I knew that. But at the same time, I think it's just circumstance. It's being in the right place at the right time. It's having the opportunities presented to you, or even seizing the opportunities. And I did have opportunities. I was training every day with the first team at Crystal Palace. I was very close to pushing through, but I just yeah I didn't make the cut. So it's just I think that's the way life is. It's sliding doors. In it's just I guess you just have to keep moving forwards. It is what it is. I'm so happy I got into another professional sport, and I had some amazing experiences in that sport as well. So I think if I did play professional football, if I did make it, I may not have had those subsequent experiences that I did have.
Actually, takes me on to our next topic of that. It's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You're a black belt in that, am I correct?
Yeah, yeah. It's my ninth year actually as a black belt, so I'm yeah technically a third degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Yeah.
So, just for anyone who's not aware, what is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? And
Yeah, well, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu it translates. Jiu-Jitsu is actually Japanese, and it translates as the gentle art. It's actually a cousin of Judo, and it can trace its origins back to the times of the samurai when they wanted techniques that could be lethal on the battlefield when they lost their weapons. So at the core of jiu-jitsu, we attack all of the major joints in the body. So basically, you learn how to break arms, elbows, shoulders, kneecaps, ankles. We even have spinal locks, and of course, we have chokeholds as well, which are meant to be lethal when applied. So yeah, that's that's what jiu-jitsu is. It became popularized due to the UFC. The actual early, I don't. Of course, you're probably aware of the UFC, the Ultimate Fighting
yeah,
Championships. This is it's a $1 billion industry now in the US. And back when I started jiu-jitsu, which was in 2000, the UFC was still just only gaining traction. There was very few people in the UK knew what it was, but the UFC became popularized because of jiu-jitsu. The early UFCs, it was very much more of a style versus style fight, and you would have wrestlers coming and fighting taekwondo black belts or boxers fighting. karate black belts, and you had these really interesting fantasy martial art matchups. But in the early matchups, there was a really skinny guy called Hoist Gracie, and he fought every type of style you can imagine, and in a UFC format, i.e., no rules, in a cage, and he would win every single fight using jiu-jitsu, submitting his opponents either with chokeholds or joint locks. And at the time, I think there was still a mystique around martial arts that karate was a form of self-defense, for example. Nobody really understood what jiu-jitsu was. It just looked an unusual thing, people fighting on the ground, and it wasn't understood in that sense. But the UFC, we saw the effectiveness of the UFC against opponents who weren't trained in ground fighting. And then after that point, really, the popularity of jiu-jitsu in the early 2000s started to explode. You started to see more academies opening up in the UK. And yeah, that's when I started training. So my first training in jiu-jitsu, it was really more MMA that I was training in at the time, but I really loved the jiu-jitsu aspect of it. So I started training in 2000. It was an amazing thing to encounter. I really training on and off during my semi-professional career because I couldn't really put all the effort into training because obviously had to attend my football training sessions. But I was still training fairly often in between. So I would, for example, train jiu-jitsu on a Monday night, and I would go to a game on a Tuesday, or training on a Tuesday, or a midweek game, and then maybe get another training session on a Thursday or Friday. So I was trying to cram everything in. As soon as I found jiu-jitsu, I just fell in love with it, and I felt like this was the sport for me potentially, especially because my football career wasn't really going to where I wanted it to go to. So
So because of that background, when you were on the football pitch and you have those comings together where it's a bit of a brawl starts, did some of the other lads want you to get really involved in that because they knew you'd take them all out?
no, I mean the thing is, I was very fortunate to have a really amazing instructor. My first instructor, he was one of the most dangerous men you could possibly encounter. He was a bouncer at a Bradford nightclub. It was one of the most notorious nightclubs in Bradford. But despite being one of the most dangerous men that you could possibly imagine, this man was one of the most nicest, humble human beings that I've ever encountered. And he was self-educated as well. He wasn't formally educated, but he was just an incredibly insightful human being, and I was really impressed by that, especially coming from a football background where, to be frank, there's a lot of ego involved in football. I think it's part of football, I don't want to disparage footballers in general, but you do see that ego plays a huge part in the elite level of football because these footballers are multimillionaires. They're made into celebrities. They're superstars. It's a very different direction for your life. But what I saw in my instructor was an incredibly powerful human being, a man who could snap you in two, literally, with his bare hands. He could destroy a person physically, but at the same time, he was one of the most humble people you could possibly meet. And so, that idea, especially when you see people particularly men with such bravado about themselves, aggression that you often see on the football pitch, for example, often displayed by people who actually have no idea how to actually fight, but yet will incite violence or want to instigate violence of some kind. What I came to understand is that the more you understand the consequences of violence, the less you want to become involved in it. So the more I started to train in jiu-jitsu, the less I thought of violence as something profitable in any situation, because the ultimate reality, especially when we're talking about the idea of self-defense, is to avoid violence at all costs. I think that's the greatest expression of a martial artist, is someone who is able to be a person of peace, a peacemaker in the world, and not to be someone who is pushing for violence or calling for violence. And I think that's really where the philosophy of martial arts comes in. I think the center, the root philosophy of a true martial artist is love, and that should be the highest goal for our training, so that we can be powerful, we can be strong, confident human beings who are able to defend ourselves and our families, but be humble with the power that we have and not be an oppressor, not be someone who puts others down, but rather as a person who is supporting societies, supporting communities, supporting families. These are the beautiful things that martial arts can potentially give to a person. And that's what I found, and that's what I gravitated to, and that's how I live my life.
You know, you do my job for me sometimes because my next question on here was what was is the appeal of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but I think you've just defined it perfectly there of what the appeal of that in any sort of martial artist. So what I'm going to ask you next instead is how did you manage to turn that not into a passion from that and from being a passion into basically a business and teaching so many youngsters how to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
I mean, my answer could be connected to that last question as well in many respects, because I think it's once you understand what martial arts can do for people, you view it as it's almost a philanthropy in a sense, because you have the ability to help people, you have the ability to empower people in a way that is very difficult through other means. So I personally believe that jiu-jitsu is an incredible vehicle for self-realization. It can change people in ways that you can't possibly imagine. You become more confident when you train. You become more confident in yourself. You become more confident in who you are. The very idea of jiu-jitsu, it encourages a self-reflection that is very difficult to find in other things, because in our training we have to do what we call tap. So you may have seen it if you watch the UFC, where you see the guy tap if he's in a submission hold, meaning that, well, what is the symbolism of a tap or a submission? As the name sounds, it means that they give in. It means that they accept defeat. So there's a level of humility that you have to employ to accept defeat, because getting beat is not, it's not easy. People don't like to get defeated, right? You see the reaction, look at the reaction of defeat and how it's manifest in many different things. Football fans are known to go crazy when their team loses. You know, the anger, the disappointment, it's a consuming thing. But imagine getting that type of experience every single day in training, multiple times during your training session. You get humbled in this way where your size and your strength means nothing. The amount of money in your bank account means nothing. How good looking you are means nothing. Imagine all of those things being taken away from you. That's what jiu-jitsu does. It makes you humble to yourself. It makes you bring yourself back to the very essence of what makes you who you are. And that's empowering. So in that sense, once people recognize that power of jiu-jitsu, it starts to sell itself. It creates communities, and that's what I did with my business, particularly in Saudi. I created communities within jiu-jitsu, groups of people all together on the mats, training with the same similar type of goal, not necessarily the same goals, but with the same kind of experience at its core, the mutual respect and the love for their fellow human beings. This was really the core of my teaching, and this is what I want within my communities that I'm teaching. And first and foremost, it's not for the money, it's for the love of the game of jiu-jitsu.
So when you've been competing at this and competing in these championships, is that sort of filling like the competitive hole that you left behind when you left football?
Absolutely, absolutely. I didn't expect that I would compete in jiu-jitsu. I didn't expect that I would compete in the world championships of jiu-jitsu. Yeah, it was essentially going to the World Cup of jiu-jitsu. I managed to do that. I managed to do it on multiple times into my 30s. The experience of competing in combat sports, I think, is very different to competing in football. I played in some fairly big games. I played in the FA Cup third round once for Guiseley. That was televised. That was a big game. But there's nothing like martial arts. The idea of competing, standing across the mat from another person. And in the case of jiu-jitsu, obviously I wasn't worried about punching or kicking, but I have a guy standing in front of me who wanted to break my arms, break my legs, and choke me unconscious like his life depended on it, because that's what I would be trying to do to him. I think that recognition of what you're undertaking is an incredibly intense experience. You have to view it as battle. You have to have that intensity, the mentality to win. Of course, it's a sport. It's not life or death, just as football is not life or death, but it has obviously a threat of potential injury. It has the potential threat of death, although it's a lot less, of course, than than it is in, for example, boxing, where you're getting a lot of head trauma. But for example, there have been cases of severe paralysis in jiu-jitsu. That's happened on a number of occasions. So serious injuries can potentially occur, and you carry this feeling with you into the fight. You could call it. Some people don't like to call it a fight because there's no punching and kicking, but dynamic of jiu-jitsu is it's certainly not as brutal as other combat sports, and I do compare jiu-jitsu to chess. I don't know if you know, I did play competitive chess also, so at one point in my life. So I consider the game of jiu-jitsu, it's the game of human chess, because it's not just about the person who has the biggest muscles or has the greatest athletic advantage. It's about strategy. It's about using your mind to create a plan and a way of attacking your opponent that will be to your advantage. So the whole dynamic of competing in jiu-jitsu was very different to football. Being on the pitch with 10 other players, you could have the greatest game ever, but your team still lose, or you could play really bad and your team still win. In football, there was, these dynamics were always about the team and the team cohesion. But what really attracted me to jiu-jitsu was that I knew that winning and losing was very much in my hands. I knew that I could win if I trained hard and I had the right mental approach each fight. And I knew I would lose if I didn't have those things present. And if I lost, it would be because I lost to the better fighter. And that dynamic is really unique to combat sports, where you stand across the mat from another human being in combat such as that. It was a truly profound and life-changing experience to be able to do that. And of course, I thankfully competed multiple times. I won some, I lost some, and and I carry those experiences with me everywhere I go. And that's what I say these things to my students. If you can go and do these things in your life, you can go and compete in something, combat sports, everything else becomes easy. Everything else becomes easy. Things at work, and you have a boss who's treating you poorly, you have difficulties in different parts of your life. If you can navigate high intensity, high pressure situations such as competing in combat sports, I think everything else in life becomes a lot easier. So, yeah, amazing experiences, and I'm so grateful to have lived the different lifetimes that I that I feel that I have. Having played football and competed in martial arts, these are things that are truly incredible experiences.
The last person we had on was a footballer called Jordan Lemon, who also plays cricket at a decent level. We asked him the question of football or cricket, and he picked football. So we've got to ask the similar question to you of jiu-jitsu or football.
Yeah, jiu-jitsu, yeah. I mean,
I thought it was
has
going to be.
Well, it's ironic because, like I said, I always felt like I could be competed at the highest level. I really felt at the time, during my peak days, I really felt like I could do anything in football. And of course, if I did make it in football, it would have made me a far wealthier man than jiu-jitsu has made me. But at the same time, I've had such incredible experiences through jiu-jitsu. I've met such incredible people. I think what I've gained from that is worth more than money. It's worth more than anything. These human experiences are really what defines us and defines the time that we spend on this earth during the short time that we do have. And yeah, I'm grateful that I've been able to have these experiences in jiu-jitsu in particular.
We got a message from one of your former teammates, Jazz Colliver.
Oh yeah, I remember Jazz. Okay, yeah.
He's issuing you a challenge. He wants to grapple you because he's convinced he'll have you, and that's his quote. Would you accept that challenge?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it'd be an honor. It would be a very humbling experience to experience the level of Jazz as he takes me, as he says. Yes, I'm open anytime.
So that's our next Stocksbridge Park Steels fundraiser. That's going on pay-per-view, live from Brackenmore. I'm sure we can organise it, and I'm sure we'll find some entertainment for the others for after the 10 seconds after you take him.
No. I'll be nice to Jazz. He was good. He was a good player, so I'll let him beat me, I think.
Well, I think the last time he managed against Stocksbridge, he beat us. So, you can maybe one submission. That hurts a bit.
We'll get one back for Stocksbridge, yeah.
Stefan, this has been absolutely brilliant. You've lived one of the most incredible lives of anyone I've ever talked to. That's no offense to anyone else who's been on podcast, but you just seem to have lived like 50 lives for all of us.
It feels like it sometimes, yeah.
But it's been absolutely fascinating to talk to you. Thank you very much for giving us a small part of your time, and I'm sure everyone will be getting in touch with us to how incredible this will be to listen to back.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time. Much love to everybody at Stocksbridge. I had such wonderful days there. I'll have to visit sometime. I'm based in London at the moment, so I'm teaching jiu-jitsu down there. That's where my academy is, but hopefully next time I'm up north, I will sure try to visit Stocksbridge and catch up with everybody there. I'm waiting for the Legends game. Apparently there was a Legends game scheduled maybe a couple of years ago, and I actually got a call about it, but it never materialized for some reason. But if there ever is a Stocksbridge Legends game, I would love to be involved in it.
We'll absolutely put that invite out should we manage to get another Legends match underway. It is, the 40th anniversary next year in 2026, so maybe we can get something for that. But Stefan Zoll, thank you so much for this.
It's a pleasure, Adam. Thanks for having me.
I'd like to thank Stefan Zoll for spending his time with us and telling us about his incredibly unique life. If you enjoyed this, please do check out our other episodes, then like this, subscribe to us on whatever platform you're listening to us on, and leave a review and a 5-star rating. That one really helps on Spotify. It helps the podcast get seen and heard by more people, and then hopefully that just keeps on growing and growing and growing, and it becomes even bigger than, whatever the biggest podcast is. Anyway, finally, from me, your host, Adam Allcroft, I'd like to really thank you all for listening, and we'll see you for the next one, and I promise that wait's not going to be as long next time. I hope. Goodbye.